Now, this is not modern management theory. This idea of unconditional responsibility to express your values in the face of difficult situations comes from the beginning of time. Human beings have been confronted by difficult situations always. I was talking before this talk with someone whose family comes from India, and a source of great wisdom from India is the Bhagavad Gita. It's a very famous sacred book. There is really a dialogue between a master teacher, Krishna, an envoy perhaps of the gods as is portrayed in the book, and Arjuna, who's a general who's about to call a civil war. And he's about to start a civil war that's terrible. People are going to die by the tens of thousands. It's all his family on both sides. It's really a situation where you say, this is really screwed. This is as bad as it gets. And the book is a discourse. How do you walk into those situations? I don't know if you've ever been in a situation in Google where you say, my God, this is horrible. I mean, there's no way, this can't work. Look, this is a terrible mess. Well, how do you walk into that? How do you use this idea of expressing my passion and unconditional responsibility to walk into that? Well, the first thing that Krishna tells Arjuna is, don't worry about the outcome. You cannot focus on the outcome, because if you're thinking on the outcome, you're forgetting what to do now. Your mind is stuck in the future. You're not paying attention to what is the next step. If you look at the Bushido, the samurai code, they say the same. If when you're fighting, you're afraid of dying, you're thinking, I need to win, you're already dead. There's no way you can fight because your mind is not there. So you can't be present. So it's like, let go of the outcome. You know that that's what you're trying to do, but don't stay thinking on that because you can't make it happen. It depends on too many factors. So you do your best to align your energy with your purpose and the object of your action, which is to get that result. And the second is devote every action to the highest values. In the book it says devote every action to me, but to me as the expression of value. And it's basically the same message. It's saying, don't worry so much about am I going to succeed or I'm going to fail. Try to succeed, but I call it the spiritual harness. The thing you rely on while you try to succeed is, even if I don't, I can look in the mirror and say, I've honored myself, I treated other people with respect, I acted with passion, with creativity, with leadership, with humility. And that does not depend on anybody else. That's why I call it unconditional. Success depends on other people. Other people can block you from succeeding. But your integrity doesn't depend on anybody. It's yours. And that's always possible to win. So that's the first practice. It's like facing life, particularly management life or business life, with that attitude of serving the values that I'm committed my life to. And then there are three very practical things. Once you decide that, how do you do it? Well, the first is with authentic communication. Speaking your truth and eliciting other people's truths. I pose in the seminar, I pose the following dilemma. I'm not going to resolve it because I want to leave time open for us to engage. The first dilemma is, if you want to be honest, several people say, honesty is a value. I want to be respectful. I imagine most people, if I say, how many people want to be respectful? Everybody will raise their hand. It's a great value. So here's the dilemma. How can you be honest and respectful when you think that the person that is presenting is an idiot? So let's say you think I'm an idiot now. It's like, you're like, oh my God, this is total bullshit, nothing works, it can't work. So you think that. So I say, well, what do you think? And you're like, oh, well, I want to be polite. I'm not going to tell this guy that. But on the other hand, I mean, if I say, this is really interesting, I mean, that's a lie. You don't find it really interesting. So you may be in a meeting and somebody puts a proposal and say, you think, that never work, it's crazy. But you can't raise your hand and say, that'll never work, it's crazy. So you might say, well, let's think about it. And you don't want to think about it because you think it's crazy. So how can you be honest and respectful in that situation? I mean, that is absolutely practical. We face this situation 100 times a day. Or a client calls you, and the client is complaining. So you're crazy. I mean, you're wrong. This is not the way it is. But if you tell that to a client, it's not going to go very well. I can guarantee. On the other hand, if you say, "Oh yes, yes, yes," well, you feel like it's demeaning because that's not true. How do you put these two things together? Well, there's a secret ingredient to put these two things together. I give you the punchline. If you want to know the technique, it's in the book. And the secret ingredient is humility. So how can you be honest and respectful? Is you have to stop thinking that your view of the world is true. And you have to recognize that it's simply your perspective. So when I think, let me just do a quick poll. How many idiots you know that think exactly like you? Okay, so we're together. I found a perfect correlation between idiots and people that don't think like I do. Now, I tended to think they are idiots, that's why they don't think like me. That's the order of causality. And then when I started reflecting, I say, maybe it's the other way around. Maybe they don't think like me, I'm upset, and that's why I call them idiots. But they're not idiots. They're just people that don't think like me. It's a major shift in perception. That's a major shift in consciousness. So I'll give you just a quick story of Jean Piaget, and then we'll move to the other two. Jean Piaget was a developmental psychologist, and he used to do this experiment with 3-year-old kids. He would give them a cube, and he put the cube in the middle. One side of the cube was red, the other side was green. So he would let the child play, familiarize himself or herself with the cube, and then he put the cube on the table so that he was seeing the green side, and the child was seeing the red side. And then he asked the child, what color do you see? And the child would say correctly, a 3-year-old would say red. And then Piaget would say, what color do you think I see? A 3-year-old will always say red. Because developmentally, a 3-year-old does not have the capacity to take another person's perspective. So if I see red, the world is red, and you got to see red. Well, I know a lot of people in companies that have more than 30 years of experience in being 3. They're not 33. They just practice being 3 for more than 30 years. So, if I see red, it is red. And if you don't see red, there's something wrong with you. So that's the lack of humility. So the way to be authentic and respectful at the same time is to understand that your perspective is not the truth. And that makes a huge impact when you are having conversations and disagreements. Once you elicit the other person's truth, you express your truth, how do you resolve conflicts, differences in views in a constructive manner? That's the next practice. And the final practice is how do you translate that agreement into effective action? So I'll finish with a little riddle from children. There are 5 frogs sitting on a log. 4 decide to jump down. How many are left on the log? Just take a guess. 1? Okay, no, 5. Why? Because they decided, but they never did it. Have you been in management meetings where a lot of decisions get made, and then there's still 5 frogs on the logs 3 months later? So there's a shift in perspective from making decisions to making promises and feeling bound by my own integrity to fulfill my promise. And that's a managerial practice. So instead of telling people what to do, you elicit their commitment and you engage their integrity. Now that takes a whole set of principles about asking people, letting them respond, letting them engage with you and negotiate. So when there's a commitment, you're eliciting their internal commitment. You're not forcing them or using your authority to make them do something.